Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the Mining Podcast. And today's guest is Craig Hutton, who's the CEO and president of Iron Bull Mining, who are a junior mining company on a mission to open up the next big African copper basin in Namibia. Craig is an economic geologist with over 25 years experience, and he's going to talk to us about a book that he's recently wrote, which is titled Mining Economics Explained, which is aimed at boards, executives and managers unpacking the economic optimization of a mine so that mining teams can maintain capital investment discipline against consistent criteria. So that's welcome, Craig, to the podcast. How you doing, Craig?
Hi, Rob. Thank you for the introduction and having me on your podcast.
Yeah, no worries, and I appreciate your time. I came across your details a few weeks ago because I noticed obviously you were advertising your book, so hence the reason why I reached out to you, because I think it'd be a good conversation, and you can obviously tell our audience about your findings and how you actually produced the book. So before we go into that, just wondered if you can tell our audience a little bit about your career, your background in the mining industry.
Yeah, sure, Rob. So I started my career in the late 80s. I joined Anglo American as a young geologist. And when I finished qualifying, I had a bursary with them. When I finished qualifying in the early 90s, I then moved on to Harmony Gold Mining Company. And I rose quite rapidly in the ranks at Harmony, and finally culminated after 7 years as an ore resource manager. I moved on from them and I joined Placer, and I was with them for a considerable number of years as the chief strategy officer, and I did cost accounting in addition to some of the other resourcing work that I've done as well. And then from there, I moved to Anglo American once again, and I became principal mining economist. I was with them for 2 years, after which I then branched out into the consulting field. And it was whilst I was in the consulting field that I was approached by a company listed on AIM called African Consolidated Resources, today known as Vast Resources. And I was responsible for bringing the Pixton Peerless mine back into life, an old Rio Tinto mine. And we delivered 3.5 million ounces of mineral resource, million ounces of reserve, and a valuation of $250 million of value for a company that had a market cap at the time of around about $25 million US. So that was a considerable success. And then over the time, when I left them, I continued with consulting, consulted back to Anglo American. I've done some work for other companies such as ERG in the DRC, all around mining economics and trying to estimate the optimal economic scale of operations, as well as trying to determine what the cutoff is. And when I say try, we have developed over the years an algorithm which really I try to unpack in the book. Just one correction, Rob, I've done 25 years doing mining economics, but I've been in the game for over 35 years. So there is some hardcore experience.
I gave you a bit of a little bit of a undoing there, but obviously it just shows that you're looking good for your age.
Well, yeah, I was going to say thank you for making me younger than I
am. Before we go and speak about the book, I mentioned obviously you're the CEO and president of Iron Bull Mining. I just wanted to just give us a quick overview of the company. We've agreed to possibly do a podcast, a future podcast on the company, but I just wanted to just give us a quick snapshot of Iron Bull Mining.
Yeah, so Rob, I was approached by Iron Bull, and essentially it started with a company called Mineworks, who had a iron ore asset in Spain, and the promoter, a gentleman by the name of Craig Hutton, approached me to assist him and divest the asset from Mineworks and then take it for a listing. I'd been I have been working on a very, very exciting asset in Namibia for a number of years. And essentially, the Kwakaland Copper Basin is the sister basin to the African Copper Basin. And it has the same geodynamic history. And so when I went out into the field 3 years ago and I got into the pit of a small miner, I saw this strata-bound copper-hosted deposit, scratched my head, and I hadn't come across it before, and began to research the deposit. And turns out that Teck Resources was there in 2004. They did a tremendous amount of work. In 2008, 2009, a company called INV Metals did a deal with them. And combined, they did over 20,000 meters of drilling. Teck Resources defined about 20 prospective areas. And finally, INV came out with a mineral resource of 10 million tons at 1% copper, grading at about 17 grams ton silver. And then more recently, a company called White Metals in 2016, I think it was, purchased the license. By then, INV and Teck Resources had left Namibia. And so all of their licenses have been up for grabs and divvied up. And White Metals last year declared a mineral resource of 7.7 million tons at 1.53% copper, with a credit of silver at 27 grams a ton. So we have done a deal with them. So we've purchased that asset, and really it'll be the sort of backbone to generating cash for us, so that we can pursue a significant exploration program. And we've brought on partners called Teck Resources, who are economic geologists, and their expertise is to go and model the basin so that we understand, where the feeder chutes are, so we can obviously then start building out the mineral resource that we have. So we're very optimistic on that. And as you said, I think it probably deserves, more time with you, unpacking and discussing, a very, very significant copper opportunity.
Yeah, certainly. So let's go on to obviously the book, Mining Economics Explained. Mm-hmm. First of all, what made you write the book?
Yeah, good question. So, I've been at, mining economics, if you wish, for 25 years. After I had, whilst I worked as a geologist, I was always keenly fascinated by economics. Immediately after studying geology, I did a Bachelor of Commerce, specializing in finance and economics. Loved economics, still love economics. And, through the years, and particularly when I joined Harmony Gold Mining Company, I met up with at the time, a young mining engineer called Don van Heerden. And he had been retained by the incumbent CEO of the company at the time, called Bernard Swanepoel. And their philosophy was, how do you maximize returns for the shareholders? And Don had come up with an optimization curve that could determine what the economic cutoff was. In the good old days, people used to use pay limits. And the problem that we were grappling with in those days is, if you mine to a pay limit, essentially you're saying you're mining to break even. And they came up with the idea of cutoff, and we're did through their work optimized or determined a cutoff that maximized cash flows. And so I became very imbued with it. A lot of that work, working with Don, contributed to the success of Harmony Gold Mining in the 1990s. In the matter of 7 years, Harmony Gold Mining became the fifth largest gold mining company globally. Now, that was a lot of hard work from Bernard Swanepoel and his philosophies and defining the Harmony way. But undergirding all of that was the concept of optimizing the ore bodies. What was always missing in that formula was real economic content. And so, what we had seen is that accountants generally just take cost numbers and they divide a numerator by a denominator, and then what you see is costs get cheaper as you increase volumes. Well, in the 2000s, in the last commodity boom, the industry globally experimented with increasing volumes. And what we found was that costs actually began to accelerate. And in fact, very, very quickly, we got into a position where we had significant margin squeeze. By 2013, the industry was in trouble. They had overproduced. And I looked at this and had been working with, by then, obviously I was back in the fold with Anglo, and the mining economics team was charged with looking after $120 billion of project pipeline. And there was this great push to increase production. And my economics, learnings had told me that there's a point at which actually costs begin to rise. You get to a point of diseconomies of scale. And it wasn't something that mining engineers at the time liked to hear. They were convinced that the bigger you get, you just continually, get economies of scale, and the concept of diminishing returns was quite foreign. And so, I just felt that, over time, I have had the ability now to weld together, the concepts that we had employed at Harmony Gold Mining Company with the optimization, and then obviously also, pulling together and actually drawing, if you wish, these U-shaped optimization cost curves for costs. And so it took me a lot of time and hard work, but essentially what we've done is we've taken microeconomics and we've taken, if you wish, mineral resource economics and welded them together. And so what belies the book, Rob, is an algorithm that I've developed over the years, that what we're able to do is we're able to pull in the mineral resources and then model the mineral resources against cost curves, and then run them through varying rates of production and matching them with cost structures to determine what an ore body can sustain. And so really that was the motivation for writing that, and then bringing that knowledge to the industry and sharing that with the view that, in fact, the analysis really informs the C-suite, because for the first time, the executive, normally what happens is, teams go and buy projects, and then they just give it to the engineers, and the engineers really don't have guidelines as to what the C-suite expects in terms of returns. And so really this is a window to look into the ore body and really understand the sort of maximum value that an ore body can deliver. And then once that is done, then you start your feasibility studies. So it guides both the executive and it guides the technical teams designing mines. And so really that was the motivation for writing this book, Rob.
Did you have any help writing it? And I don't mean necessarily writing the book, but did you have other people's learnings and teachings that you encompassed their knowledge into the book?
Yeah, absolutely. Isaac Newton said we stand on the shoulders of giants, and there was certainly work by Prof. Dick Minnett, who had latched on from Wits University, who had latched on to the optimization curves. And I actually sat under his tutelage in 2006 and began what Wits University were doing a graduate diploma in engineering, and it was really focused around minerals. And I met him on that course, and I'd been doing a whole bunch of work, and we compared notes. And the two of us almost got married, dare I say, because it was in those days, subject matter, again, as I said, that hadn't really found favor. But Dick also says or concedes that, whilst academics have, espoused, these cost curves and optimization, etc., they've never really had tools that they can actually take the theory and actually, package it into something that miners can use. So that again stimulated me toward, really getting in and crafting a comprehensive algorithm. And then, of course, there were others. I quote them in the book. McCarthy, for instance, and his colleagues came up with the Hill of Value. I was first introduced to a paper written by McCarthy in 2006, and my boss at Anglo said, "Can you replicate it?" It took me many years to do that, but we've been able to replicate that Hill of Value, which I think is a very nice visual tool, because what it does is really brings together all the sort of theory and all the learning, and really the works of others that really support the fundamentals of what I've written about, Rob.
Why would you say this book is different to any other books on, I suppose, a similar topic written by other authors?
So, Rob, when you look at the sort of landscape of literature out there, you see, books out there called mining economics. And, my challenge reading those books, they were very informative, but they either had a sort of financial slant to them and NPVs, etc. And this is, how you go about calculating NPVs, and some of them were quite sophisticated. Others were more of an engineering sort of content. And always what has been missing is the sort of economic slant. So despite the fact that they call economics, actually, when you looked at the credentials of authors, many of them didn't have any economics background. Some of them did, but none of them really were unpacking, the cost curves and unpacking microeconomics. And so, what my book does, first of all, it really looks at economic theory and economic content. And then what it does is takes those theories and actually draws the curves. But more than that, it actually welds, ore body signatures with economics. And so I think that is a critical difference. It really looks at, or the emphasis is saying, in truth, what can the ore body sustain? And it considers the primacy of the ore body. And then it looks at economics. So it's quite different in terms of approach. And I think it's for those who are interested in the topic, perhaps novel, but in saying novel, it has a lot of underpinnings. There are a lot of, it's well researched. If you have a look at the bibliography of the book, there's many pages of references by other authors. So I think that's the slot, and that's really what makes it quite different to other books on the subject.
Why would you say the book is, I suppose, more important now in today's world than maybe previously?
So could you repeat that? Sorry, I got distracted by the phone.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just asking, why do you think the book now is probably more relevant and more important in the mining industry today than perhaps previously?
Yeah, good question. Rob, I lived through the last super cycle, and the super cycle was go big or go home. That was the mantra of the day. At the end of that cycle, the industry was descended upon by, all the consulting houses, and they were telling miners that they didn't know how to mine one, they didn't know how to make money from mines, they were business oriented. Bear in mind that during the last super cycle, the investors were encouraging CEOs to build big pipelines and go big, and really no one really understood economics. But then you had people like Ivan Glassenberg who was saying, miners really need to understand, economics. And so having had a look at that, and then, in the aftermath of all that, looking at all the comments and the bloodletting. And then looking forward and understanding that we're going to go back into a super cycle, and probably a super cycle that's going to dwarf what we've had, given the fact that, you know, we're going through a major energy transition, and the oil of the future is essentially going to be battery metals. And so it's not just understanding, you know, oil wells, it's understanding lithium, it's understanding copper, it's understanding nickel, et cetera, and they're all different. But we're going into a new super cycle, and so the danger is, you know, do we repeat what we did in the last super cycle? If there's one thing about history that we learn from history, is that we don't learn from history. And you know, if I can make a contribution to put my hand up and say, you know, colleagues, here are the reasons why we underperformed in the last super cycle. And it's not because miners don't understand business. There's some very, very astute businessmen. I mean, let me give you an example. Mark Cutifani, Mark Bristow, you know, a litany of players, Bernard Swanepoel back in the day. You know, one can list them. I mean, these guys are really astute guys, and they really understand business. But I think the gaps, significant gaps, exist between the investing community, who have this essentially naive understanding of what mining's about. You know, mines you can't flick on and off. You know, it takes a lot of patient capital. I was reading on the wires recently, I think it was S&P, there was a commentator reminding everyone that it takes between 16 and 20 years from when a mine is first defined to come online. And so, you know, in the investment community, their timelines are a lot shorter. In fact, their timelines are 3 months. And, you know, if things aren't performing the way an analyst expects them to perform, you know, they criticize quite severely management. Yet management have to take a longer term view. So, you know, it's really trying to sort of close the gaps between the different players, get the investment community to really understand that mining essentially is a long-term game. You can't break it up into 3-month intervals. And the other thing is, you know, to challenge the idea that, you know, should we go back into the paradigm of bigger is better, because we have a significant demand gap coming. By 2025, we all know that, you know, copper's at the current levels of production is, you know, the gap is going to open between supply and demand. And I was actually reading the other day, Rob, which was quite interesting, that in the next 26 years, the demand for copper will be more than the demand and consumption used in the history of mankind when it comes to copper. And I would imagine that's quite similar for other commodities as well. So, you know, a long roundabout way of describing to you why certainly I believe, you know, there's this difference in the contribution that this book can make going into the next super cycle.
Anyone reading the book, what are some of the major takeaways that they can get from going through the book? Is there any highlights that you can tell us about?
No, for sure. And I think what I try to do, and I'm at pains to do, is the primacy of the ore body, Rob. Every single ore body has a different economic signature, and the reason for that, it has a different. Every deposit has a different geochemical signature. It's just the way the fluids, it's the structure, the architecture. A colleague of mine talks about the plumbing, and so, you know, that's why we get structural geologists into our team, so that understand the plumbing and the architecture, so we can do better predictions. So, and then from an economic perspective, and really work that when I did some work for ERG, which was you know, drawing sort of modern grade tonnage curves. So I advanced grade tonnage curves in my book to look at things in terms of doing relative comparisons rather than absolute comparisons, because what I can then, and what I do is I'm able to compare the metal content with the ore. And really it's about understanding the ore body and the ore body signature, and then understanding the economics around that ore body. So for instance, an ore body that you have 1.5 kilometers, 2 or 3 kilometers away from you could have a radically different economic signature to the one you're mining. And a mistake that many investors make is the belief, and even C-suite colleagues, is the belief that, frankly, you can determine the output of a particular ore body rather than letting the ore body telling you what it can deliver. So that's why we've had many instances in the past where engineers come, they build massive plants, and then soon realize that the pit that they're mining will never support the capacity that they have built. So really the primacy of the ore body comes out. And then of course the second one is, as I've been waxing lyrical, Rob, about taking theory and really translating that into a workable model. And so I unpack the cost curves, and then really show a pathway to how you combine them, and then how you optimize, and ultimately culminating in a hill of value. Of course, surrounding all of those concepts, I didn't want to just make it a technical book, because I wanted it to appeal to a broader audience, and particularly give investors insights into what we grapple with in the mining industry. And so I unpack, for instance, and adopt, if you wish, design thinking, which has worked really well for the IT business. And so really looking at a deposit and saying, what are the factors, why the first lens that design theory looks through is desirability. And really, in today's world, unpacking desirability to be going after copper, etc., is quite easy given the green revolution. But then you have to look at viability, and my book really fits into the viability lens. And then once you've understood the viability of an operation, is then to take it to feasibility. And I think in the mining industry, there's a confusion between viability and feasibility. So in my opinion, feasibility is a very technical engineering lens sphere, whereas viability is really an economic lens that you look at ore bodies. And then ultimately you go through into sustainability. And there's two components to sustainability. The one is economic sustainability. I mean, we're just going through at the moment a very high inflationary environment. And so sustainability is all about economics, in addition to the new thinking around sustainability. And so in part I address, not in depth, but issues around ESG that are becoming more and more important. So I tried to, in terms of the relevance of the book, try to cover a number of different touch points, but really bringing it back to the heart of what the book's message is. And that's the primacy of the ore body and welding them with real economics, perhaps for the first time.
In the introduction, I mentioned the book maybe for board executives and managers. But who else, apart from those, who else do you think could benefit from reading this book, other than obviously who I've just sort of mentioned, or those subcategories and job titles that I've just mentioned?
Well, yeah, I mean, the title of the book is, it's for investors, it's for the C-suite, it's for directors, it's for technical people as well. So, I mean, with such a wide audience, there's a challenge to be able to just, try and sort of present a book to really appeal to as wide an audience as I can. And so really it's all the participants in the mining industry. And I think, there's a incredible need as well to make sure that, those who are involved with, ESG, for instance, that we don't lose sight of the fact that, without capital, we can't exploit deposits. A deposit in the ground has no value. And so I think, not only those who invested in the commercialization of ore deposits, but those who are also involved with, this new trend around ESG, will find some insights as to, the mechanics of actually building a mine and what goes into the mine, and also understanding the risks that go into building a mine. What we're finding in today's world is, this trend, this, if I may say, this fascination with socialism once again. And the idea is it's terribly unfair to reward investors when prices are high, and the temptation to come in and tax and have, saying that, communities are missing out, etc. And I think what that does is it scares capital. They say capital is a coward. And what the sort of thinking today is that, we're happy to tell investors that they must take all the risk, but when the big rewards come, it's unfair for you to be enjoying that, and so we're going to take that away from you. And so I think there's a conversation to be had with those who are providing capital, and then ultimately, sort of this notion of equitable sharing of the spoils. And I think in my book, certainly the way I approach exploiting ore deposits, I don't necessarily believe that it's shareholders against stakeholders. I believe there is a middle path. And certainly when I talk to management teams, I share with them how you achieve that by applying cutoffs. But I'm not going to belabor this particular point. But perhaps it's also the material for the next book that I'm being pummeled now to write. There are people saying this book deserves a follow-up, so I'm really listening to what people are saying out there, and making notes, and certainly there will be a follow-up to this book in time, Rob.
Yeah, that was going to be my last question. Actually, I was going to ask you, have you got any other books in the pipeline? So you might as well answer that question now.
So yeah, I think the reception has been quite remarkable. I thought that I would be doing well if I sold 100 books, because in my view, this is a very narrow field. I've actually sold over 1,000 books, Rob.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's been quite remarkable, the response. On LinkedIn, I've had close to 70,000 impressions, a lot of reactions to the book, which have been all positive. And so to answer your question, I'm getting feedback, people are asking questions, people want more insight. I have been asked by quite a number of executive teams to do one-on-one with them and with their team, which I've done over the last few months. And I continue to have from many mid-tiers and senior players, people making inquiries for me to help them with optimization. And I'm certainly keen to help people. And so one of the ways is clearly to listen to the audience, to try and understand what they're grappling with beyond what I've unpacked. And I'll be making notes of all that, Rob, and at the right time, certainly sit down and pen another book. I have to just say one thing, that for someone who's not a literary genius like myself, it's a lot of effort. So I don't relish sitting down again doing it, but I'll do it because I think it's important for people who've had the opportunity to spend so many fruitful years in the industry to give something back. And really that's what I'm keen to do for the next generation, to share with them these experiences and ultimately to be in a position to optimally exploit mineral resources that ultimately are exhausting resources, and really to have good stewardship of them, to be able to build mines that are ultimately give back to society in an appropriate way.
How long did it actually take you to write the book, from, I suppose, initial thinking about writing a book to actually then publishing it?
Yeah, the sort of pen to paper, Rob, 4 years, dare I say. I'm a late bloomer and slow worker, but I try and be thorough. So yeah, it was long. Hopefully the next one won't take me as long.
You're used to it now, so you can cut that time by half now.
I just think my wife probably is not used to it.
And obviously, you said you've sold 1,000 copies. What is some of the response that you've had from people that have obviously purchased and read the book?
Very encouraging, Rob. You know, a lot of people, you know, I read the comments coming through. You know, people have said really good content, great perspectives, great insights. So I've had, of course, you know, you get these sort of outliers, you get sort of some criticisms, but you know, I think, you know, going forward, you know, I think ultimately it's to engage with people who have some criticisms. One of the criticisms that I've had, but not necessarily on the feedback, but I've had over the years, is they say, how can you do optimization in a spreadsheet? And my algorithms are run in spreadsheets when you have these 3D models. And really, in my next book, I'll address that in more detail. And frankly, the 3D work that the engineers do and the work that I do are very compatible. And so, you know, I get outputs that I generate, and then you take it into 3D space. And so, well, these are the outputs. Call your 3D model up, and let's test what I'm saying against, you know, how the ore body holds together. And so, you know, we continue to address, you know, I wouldn't call those criticisms, but in people's minds, how you translate, you know, my approach to optimization to what they are used to and familiar with. And really, it's about reconciling that. So overall, I think a very good reception, Rob.
And lastly, for those that are listening, if they haven't already read your book, why would someone buy and invest in reading, obviously, the book? And what could they, and I suppose you have answered this question anyway, but what could someone that's listening, and obviously I've got a variety of different people listening to this to these podcasts, but why should they invest and read your book, and what would they generally take away from it, unless they're obviously a particular specialist that will want to get something from it?
So, Rob, I mean, it's a wide audience, and my response to this is a very simple: do you want to make money from the resource that you have? And if the answer is yes, we want to make money, and I should imagine you'd want to get a return on investment, then, you know, this is an approach that has been proven and tried. Certainly, when a company like Harmony Gold Mining Company embedded this into their thinking, and over 7 years became the 5th largest gold mining company in the world, and we're profitable at it. And then over the years, having taken that thinking forward and again demonstrating value, i.e. in bringing Pix and Peerless Mine to market, we used the same philosophies, and it was about maximizing cash flows and getting the optimal, you know, moments in terms of understanding the ore body. Tried and tested techniques to how you turn an ore body into you know, chasing alpha, if you wish, making money. And so that would be my simple answer to a broad set of audience is, if you want to make money, you know, consider reading my book and understanding what it takes to bring an ore body to a point where you can maximize returns over and through the cycles.
Craig, really appreciate your time in sharing your thoughts and your wisdom, and obviously detailing us about your book. For those that are listening, where can they purchase the book?
The easiest, Rob, you know, you can either go to my LinkedIn profile, and you will see it's kind of advertised there. Click on it, and you'll go straight through to Amazon, or just call up Amazon on your PC and type in the title of my book, and it'll come up, and you can purchase it online.
Great. And if our audience have got any questions, how can they go about contacting you? And are you on any other social media platforms apart from LinkedIn and Amazon?
I'm only on LinkedIn for now. My view has been I want to keep this professional. A lot of people are asking me to get on Twitter. I may or may not do that in time. But yeah, my email address is there. Perhaps what I could do, and I don't know, Rob, how you do that, but you have my email. So
yeah, we can enclose those in the show notes accompanying this, so we can put those details on there. So people can, when they're listening to the podcast, they can view the show notes and you'll have their contact details there. So if they've got any questions, then obviously they can email you.
Sure, and I'm always happy to field those questions.
Yeah, great. Really appreciate your time. Good luck with the book. Hopefully we'll be speaking soon. Again, on obviously the company that you're the CEO and president of. So for those that are listening, appreciate your time. It's certainly an episode that I think that you would have enjoyed, taking something away. And please consider buying Craig's book. There's probably so many things you've got. I haven't read it myself, but there's probably a lot of points that you could take away from that in any, I suppose, discipline that you're involved in within the mining industry. So appreciate you listening to this. Again, I like all the comments that you send me, emails and encouragement to keep producing these podcasts. Again, appreciate if you can share this episode with others, friends, family, others in the mining industry to get this content and to help Craig sell some more books. So appreciate your time for listening. And until next time, happy mining.